Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And I'm not really necessarily sure what I'm going to title this video because I could title this video a multitude of things, but it is going to be a very interesting video, and I'm going to converse about a multitude of topics. And the topics that I'm going to be talking about mainly, of course, the Vasyl Lomachenko versus Devin Haney situation. And of course, overall, in my opinion, overall, what Lomachenko brings to the table as a complete fighter, which I kind of talked about in my video the other day, but I also thought that I would kind of reminisce over the past 10 plus years. You know, growing up watching sports within the 2010s, it really is crazy to me, at least in my opinion, of really how much the time changes really in just a blink of an eye. One year overall, you can have a certain fighter that, in my opinion, is clearly the number one pound for pound fighter. Then just the next year, or maybe several months later, you may have another fighter that is clearly the number one pound for pound fighter. Or certain fighters that we remember once upon a time looking to be the next up and comer, best of the division. They may no longer even be relevant. You know, just a story overall, just a quick story for those of you that go this far back several years ago. Once upon a time in the welterweight division, when Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Manny Pacquiao, they were still at the top of the division, and of course you had fighters like a Marcos Maidana and a Timothy Bradley. You know that who the hell was that one other Argentine fighter? I think his name was Diego Chavez or something like that. The guy who ended up fighting Timothy Bradley, and there was a few others. You know, for those of you that even go back a bit further, you remember Mike Alvarado and Brandon Rios and their little trilogy that they had. I can't remember if that was at 140 or 147. But anyways, not to digress at all. But there was a time actually where Sean Showtime Porter, for those of you that know him or remember him, who of course recently retired last year after he ended up getting beat by Terrence Bud Crawford, there actually was a time where Sean Porter was actually looked at to be the best fighter in that division. Or I'm not going to say the best fighter, but the best up and comer, the guy that could potentially beat the undefeated Floyd Mayweather Jr. And for some of you that remember, he was actually running through certain very good top contenders. He ran through Paulie Malignaggi, no problem. He knocked him out, I believe, within about 3 or 4 rounds. And there was a bunch of people, including DontaesBoxingNation, talking about how good Sean Porter was going to be because he was running through people like no one had ever run through these fighters before. He also ran through Devin Alexander. There was a couple of other fighters, I believe, that were very decent that he ran through as well. And then eventually, of course, Sean Porter, he ended up losing to Kell Brook, which at least at the time I knew eventually was going to come because I thought that Sean Porter was a little bit reckless. I thought that his defense was a little bit leaky, and Kell Brook was able to expose that. But there was a multitude of fighters throughout my generation, throughout the 2010s, because I'm 24 years old and I've really only been watching sports in full completion now for the past 10 plus years, and boxing has been my main sport. There was really a lot of fighters that came up throughout the 2010s that, if I remember, they were very decent talents. And Vasyl Lomachenko, from what I remember, he really overall started on the come up, at least from what I remember, when he was on a first main big card. It actually was on the Manny Pacquiao versus, the Manny Pacquiao versus Floyd Mayweather Jr. card. And I remember he ended up fighting this undefeated Puerto Rican fighter. And overall, some of the guys at my school at the time, when I was in high school, they actually talked about how talented Vasyl Lomachenko looked because he beat up that fighter so badly. And that was when Lomachenko actually overall was first starting to come on the rise. I think the first fight that I ended up watching Lomachenko win, he was fighting a guy that I believe was some sort of Asian fighter. I can't necessarily remember what the fight was, but I believe he only had about 3 fights on his resume. I believe that he was 2-1. And Lomachenko actually could not even compete as well as what he wanted to because I believe that he either had a broken hand or a hurt hand, so he really could only use his jab in that fight, at least from what I remember. But ever since then, Lomachenko really, of course, was very, very, very much hyped up by Top Rank. And you have to talk about Lomachenko in context because depending overall about who talks about him, if you have a Dante's Boxing Nation or a Boxing Ego, they're going to talk about him, of course, very negatively and detract overall from a lot of what he's done because once again they have a little bit of resentment and hatred towards Lomachenko because once upon a time he was ranked as the number one pound for pound fighter. But that's the reason overall why I'm here to also talk about this because you need to put things in proper context. And yes, at one point in time, in my view, Lomachenko clearly did deserve to be the number one pound for pound fighter. He was running through guys and he looked to be the most dominant fighter on the planet. even though, of course, he had that one loss to Orlando Salido. But it was very clear that this version of Lomachenko, at least when he was running through guys like Nicholas Walters and Jorge Linares and Guillermo Regendao, who at the time was top 6 pound for pound on almost every single list, and of course he was undefeated. Lomachenko was running through certain guys that looked very decently talented and were clear A-grade champions. Gary Russell Jr. was another one. Lomachenko, very clearly, in my view, is one of the all-time great talents that I have ever seen. He probably is one of the greater fighters that I've ever seen, but what I am going to say is this. Just because I think that you're a greater fighter or a decently great fighter doesn't mean that I can necessarily call you an all-time great fighter. And unfortunately for Lomachenko, within these past few years, ever since the loss to Teofimo Lopez, the clock has been ticking on Vasyl Lomachenko to really see what he can truly accomplish. Because in my opinion, unfortunately for Lomachenko, there are certain fights that did not happen. Now, certain people, of course, blame him for the Mikey Garcia fight happening, or excuse me, not happening. That wasn't really Lomachenko's fault, and anyone who really knows about what was truly going on, they know that it just is what it is. Mikey Garcia avoided Vasyl Lomachenko like the plague. There is no doubt about that if you know truly what was going on. And then, of course, there was Gervonta Tank Davis. He was not interested in it either. It just is what it is. But the question is now about Vasyl Lomachenko is what can he do now to possibly become an all-time great fighter or to lengthen his career? And is he really going to beat the fighters like that of a Devin Haney, a Shakur Stevenson, a Gervonta Tank Davis? Or, overall, is he maybe not as skilled as what we once all thought? In my opinion, I think Lomachenko is very, very highly skilled. If you're asking me what is the problem at 135, well, I think overall that there is a little bit of a limitation that he has with certain fighters that obviously are bigger than him, but not only that, but are willing to exchange with him. It seems overall that he is a little bit uncomfortable in that I'm not going to say that he can't necessarily compete against those type of fighters, but it does overall put him a little bit out of his comfort zone. If you're able to get in his grill and if you're able to exchange with him and make him a little bit uncomfortable. Of course, you have to do this, of course, with establishing distance very decently well, going to the body consistently. Overall, that would be one of the few main weaknesses that I see with Lomachenko, is that his defense, in my opinion, is very, very good, but he doesn't seem to defend the body quite as well as what overall one would think. So it is what it is, but Vasyl Lomachenko very clearly, I think, is a great all-around fighter, at least in terms of skill. But the question is overall about this Devin Haney fight, which apparently has recently been set up. What is he going to be able to do against Devin Haney? Is he actually going to be able to beat Devin Haney? And I'm going to talk about that in this video. But let's get straight into it. Let's see what Dante has to say.
Dontae's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So it looks like Vasyl Lomachenko, he got exactly what he wanted. Vasyl, he wanted to push this fight out further. Devin Haney, he wanted this fight early. He wanted it in like February or March. But actually, now that I think about it, Devin Haney actually wanted the fight even before that. Devin wanted to fight Lomachenko instead of fighting George Kambosos in the rematch. But Lomachenko, he decided to fight Jermaine Ortiz instead. Now, according to...
Well, of course, and if Lomachenko is smart, which in my opinion, he's a very intelligent individual, he knew overall that that was what was best for him. You don't want to take a year layoff and then just jump straight away right into the Devin Haney fight. That's a very dangerous fight. And in my opinion, I've already stated this, even though I do believe that if you're going to ask me who is the more skilled fighter of the two, and once again, people overall, ask me, they're like, oh, how dare you say that? How can you say overall Lomachenko is more skilled than Devin Haney? Devin Haney's going to completely beat him. I would favor Devin Haney in the fight. And I think that Devin Haney is going to win against Lomachenko. Is there certain things that I think that Lomachenko does better than Devin Haney? Yes, I do. But I think that the reach that Devin Haney has, I think that the size that he has, combined with the skill set and also with the fight IQ, I just think is going to be too much for Vasyl Lomachenko. In my opinion, Devin Haney is a guy that I'm not really sure how tall he is, but he looks about 5'9", maybe even a bit taller. He's also a guy that has about a 71-inch reach. A lot of people don't understand overall that Lomachenko, he has about 65 inches of reach. Those arms overall are not that big, and that's a big part of the reason why he has to fight the way that he does. It's almost kind of like Max Holloway in that of the UFC. Except Max Holloway, I don't think overall he's anywhere near as skilled as what people overall try to say that he is. Not saying that he's still not a great fighter, he is, but there's a reason why he gets outperformed by certain fighters in the UFC. It's kind of similar. Max Holloway, a lot of the times, overall, he ends up getting hit with certain punches or overall running into certain things that he may not, want to, because overall he has those shorter arms, so he has to go a little bit on the inside. Now Lomachenko, he doesn't really run into shots from what I see. He doesn't really overall run into repeated shots. He's very good defensively, and he's always on the move. But of course, he always puts himself a little bit at risk, especially against these bigger fighters, because he pretty much has to. Lomachenko, and once again, there's these certain guys that say, oh, I'd like to see Lomachenko fight like Mayweather on the back foot and fight defensively. Well, sure, he can do that a little bit, but he's not going to be able to do that against fighters like a Devin Haney or someone like a Teofimo Lopez. He's not going to be able to do it like that. I'm sure that he can attempt to do that, and in a way, he can probably do that. But Vasyl Lomachenko, he's not mainly going to do that against those fighters because he knows overall that that's not really the winning strategy. But what Vasyl Lomachenko is going to have to do against Devin Haney, in my view, is that he's going to have to be more offensive than what he's been in these recent showings. He has no chance, in my opinion, if he's going to be, waiting around overall just to see if Devin Haney tires out and just to see overall what he can do offensively. Lomachenko has to be very offensive from the jump. His stamina has to be the best that it ever has been. He has to throw the max amount of punches that he ever has in the fight. And if he doesn't really have a real chance against Devin Haney, in my opinion. Because if you fight him the way that you did against Teofimo Lopez or even against Jermaine Ortiz, Devin Haney is probably going to win that fight 9 rounds to 3 or 8 rounds to 4.
Reports, it looks like the date is going to be May 20th.
And that's not me saying that Lomachenko is going to get absolutely teed up. But Devin Haney is going to be the more offensive fighter. So we'll see.
Someone reported it on Twitter, and Devin Haney actually responded and confirmed it. So as Devin Haney put it, this is a real legacy fight. I mean, if you just listen to what old media has said about Vasyl Lomachenko, he's the Matrix. Bob Arum even said fighters like Sugar Ray Leonard, Hagler, Hearns, Floyd Mayweather, and Ali don't even compare to Lomachenko. This is who Devin Haney is fighting in May. Now, that's such a wild thing to say. You guys probably don't even believe me when I say Bob Arum said it. So since that's probably the case, let's go ahead and play the clip.
I'm seeing something so special that it will have to be part of history. Look, I've been around great fighters. Let's, without bullshit, there was Leonard and Hagler, and then there was Floyd. He was a hell of a fighter. I've never seen anybody like this. None of them compared to him.
That's also Ali and Pacquiao too?
And even Ali. Yeah.
And even Ali. Floyd Mayweather and Muhammad Ali.
And once again, this is why you have to be very careful with certain comparisons. Because many times people overall will overhype them. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people overall, of course, especially these LDBC and new media guys, they love to take a look at Lomachenko and they love to say, oh, well, Lomachenko was always overrated. He never deserved to be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. No, Lomachenko at one point in time deserved to be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. That's not really where Lomachenko was overrated. But many of these guys, of course, are going to say that, but that Lomachenko is not the only guy that they've alleged this with. They also attacked Canelo Alvarez, Naoya Inoue, Tyson Fury, all those guys, and they all have one thing in common. They're not black American fighters, and overall they at one point in time have threatened a top 5 or the #1 pound-for-pound spot. Okay, so that's the reason why they're against those fighters, period, point blank. But what I will say is this. Once again, if you're going to compare Lomachenko to Mayweather or Pacquiao or those guys, yes, then in that sense, overall, he would be overrated because you have to overall have those type of accomplishments first to really be compared to those type of fighters. Now, I understand what people are saying. Lomachenko is one of the greatest talents personally that I've ever seen. He has great offense. He has great defense when it comes down to it. He has great footwork. He has great foot movement. He has great head movement. He has very good defense. His angles overall are a work of art. He's a very complete all-around fighter. There's no doubt about it. However, overall, once again, like I said, one could say that he should have had a much better showing in the Teofimo Lopez fight than what he did. And in my opinion, in the last big 50-50 fight that he was in, he ended up clearly losing. It just is what it is. So this Devin Haney fight, is going to be a very, very big fight for both of them. But it's going to be huge for Vasyl Lomachenko. So we're going to see overall how far he can truly go.
Don't even compare to the Matrix, Vasyl Lomachenko, according to Bob Arum. So if Devin Haney beats Vasyl Lomachenko, that means Bob Arum, he's going to consider Devin Haney as the greatest fighter of all time, right? Most likely not, because we all know what time it is. See, that is the best thing about old media. They do a wonderful job of promoting their fighters as the greatest fighters of all time, which means if Devin Haney does beat Lomachenko, that makes the win just that much bigger, right? Because we know if Lomachenko beats Devin Haney, they will treat the win as if they had Devin Haney as pound for pound #1, the best fighter in the world.
Well, I would agree, Dante, but let's also be real. You do the same shit, and that's what fanboys always do. Fanboys are always the same. It doesn't really matter who they're cheering for. They're all emotional in the same way. That's why you need a logical and objective mindset, so you don't rank things overall in a bullshit way, in a illogical way. But anyway.
When Lomachenko beat him, they're going to then
Because if you ask DontaesBoxingNation, and this has always been my thing about the LDBC and new media, if you ask them a question about Vasyl Lomachenko or Canelo Alvarez or Tyson Fury or Alexander Usyk, and if you ask those guys, hey, are any of those guys all-time great fighters? What the majority of them would say, oh no, how could you even say that? How could you even say that they're all-time great fighters? But if you ask them overall, hey, do you think that Terrence Bud Crawford is an all-time great fighter? More than likely, the majority of them would say yes. Even though Terrence Bud Crawford, if we're really going to go there, if we talk about him compared to Usyk, Lomachenko, Fury overall, and also Canelo Alvarez, he doesn't have the resume of any of those guys. And a certain amount of people may say, what the hell are you talking about? He's unified a division completely, and overall he defeated Gamboa and all these other guys, blah, blah, blah. Problem is that the biggest win of his career is against Sean Showtime Porter. Tyson Fury was able to beat Klitschko when he was a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter, and was able to beat Deontay Wilder when he was a top 20 pound-for-pound fighter. Both of those fights, Tyson Fury was not favored to win. And he was able to come back and dominate the both of them. Has Terrence Bud Crawford really ever had a fight to where it's been looked at to that magnitude? I don't think so. And then, of course, you have Alexander Usyk against Anthony Joshua. You have Lomachenko against Guillermo Rigondeaux. Overall, when it comes down to it, combined with Nicholas Walters and Jorge Linares and Gary Russell Jr., when it comes down to it, you also have Canelo Alvarez against Gennady Golovkin, Adesanya Lara, Caleb Plant, Danny Jacobs, a couple of others that I'm not mentioning. Like Terrence Bud Crawford, once again, and I like Terrence. Terrence is one of my favorite fighters to watch, but, we have to be fair here. We have to be fair with the comparison. So that's always been my thing about Dante and all these other guys. Is like, do you truly believe that Vasyl Lomachenko is highly overrated? And don't get me wrong, in some sense of the word, if you're comparing him to Ali and some of these other guys that have accomplished way more things than him, then yes, in that sense, he is overrated. But are you really saying that all in all because you truly 100% believe that? Or are you also saying it because Lomachenko is not the right complexion for your protection? It just is what it is.
Sudden give Devin Haney all the credit in the world just because he looks good on Lomachenko's resume, losing to him. The same thing they did when Tyson Fury beat Deontay Wilder.
Well, Dante, I agree with that, but you can't have it both ways. And what Dante just recently stated, and I've been saying this now for a while, and I said Dante would do this. That's what all fanboys do eventually when they realize that their main fighter has disappointed them or their main athlete has disappointed them. Certain people will stick by them illogically, and other people, they'll do the complete also illogical thing, which is completely kick them to the curb. I don't like you anymore. You have no more meaning to me when it comes down to it. So that's why Dante, all of a sudden, he basically says that Deontay Wilder was trash, or he overall tries to allege now that that he really wasn't that good. Remember, this is the same dude that at one point in time had Deontay Wilder number 4 pound for pound on his list. So what happened? I don't mind Dante bringing up the point of people saying that Deontay at one point in time was trash, and then those same people, when Fury beat him, they all of a sudden said how good he was. Yes, that's how fanboys work. For those of you that watch tennis, because I watch tennis a lot, Novak Djokovic, in my opinion, is the greatest tennis player that I've ever seen. Now, it can be debated in terms of accomplishments and other things, but all around, Novak Djokovic is the most complete tennis player, at least men's tennis player that I've personally ever seen. But when it comes down to it, if you take a look at the Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer fans, when he finally tied them overall in terms of Grand Slams, what was the excuse? They basically said, oh, well, Novak Djokovic. He'll never have the grace. He'll never have the personality over all of those guys. Just stupid bullshit that really doesn't matter. And then they would always also make the excuse, oh, well, Novak Djokovic is in the weakest era ever. Even though they have very talented guys like Daniel Medvedev and Carlos Alcaraz and, Tsitsipas and a multitude of other guys. But those same fans of Roger Federer, they don't mention that most of the guys that Roger Federer ever beat ain't never won shit. It just is what it is. And don't get me wrong, that's not me trying to make an excuse. But all of a sudden that Rafael Nadal beats Daniel Medvedev in a Grand Slam, now all of a sudden that he's the leading Grand Slam guy because they robbed Djokovic overall, at least overall, by not letting him allow to play in that Australian Open. Now all of a sudden, the competition ain't so weak. Isn't that a bitch when it comes down to it? But it is what it is. That's a conversation for another time. My point being is this. That's how fanboys operate. That's how fanboys operate. So overall, you can't rely on those guys. Anyway.
Tyson Fury beat Deontay Wilder. Wilder was the worst heavyweight champion of all time, according to old media. I mean, they would actually write articles. Writers would actually headline the articles talking about how horrible of a fighter Deontay Wilder was, right? From Teddy Atlas to actual boxing writers. But soon as time...
Well, here's my question to you, Dante. What do you truly believe about Deontay Wilder? Was he truly once upon a time top 4 pound for pound? Or is he complete garbage and does Tyson Fury really not deserve that much credit? Because the main reason overall why DontaesBoxingNation is now putting him to the side is so he doesn't have to give credit to Tyson Fury. So Tyson Fury is not later on compared to Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson, all these other guys. I've already said this about Tyson Fury, and once again, a lot of people disagree. Listen, dude, it's very clear that Tyson Fury not only is a great fighter, he's an all-time great fighter. He's one of the best offensive/defensive heavyweights that I've seen. He's a complete all-around fighter. He's a very swift overall heavyweight, especially for his size. He's a guy, all in all, that would give anyone trouble and hell possibly in the heavyweight division. And if we're truly talking about Tyson Fury, not only has he won every belt in that division when it comes down to it, but he's still undefeated to this day. And he has a great win over Vladimir Klitschko. He has great wins over Deontay Wilder, two guys that were A-grade fighters. And then Dillian White, you could at least debate as an A-. And some people have said to me, how can you say that Dillian White is an A-grade fighter or an A- fighter? Because he's defeated certain fighters that at one point in time were former champions, like that of an Alexander Povetkin. Now, Povetkin, of course, had seen better days, as some people have mentioned. He was about 40 years old, I believe. That's fair. But he also was able to completely dominate him when he was a top 10 guy. On top of that, he also was able to completely dominate Joseph Parker, at least mainly. He beat Oscar Rivas when he was undefeated. And, of course, he beat Derek Chisora. So it's very clear that Dillian White, at that time, was one of the better guys in the heavyweight division. He probably was ranked number 5. It's probably an A- win. I don't think there's any doubt about it. You don't have to rank it as an A or an A+ win. But at the end of the day, an A- win, in my opinion, is fair.
Tyson Fury beat Deontay Wilder. All of a sudden, it became the greatest.
And if we compare Tyson Fury to a certain amount of the other heavyweights in history, because people always love to say that shit, especially if they're stuck in the past overall. And sometimes it's true. Sometimes the current fighter is not greater than that of an older fighter. But is it really that true that Tyson Fury cannot compare to a lot of the past heavyweights? Or is that people overall that really just don't know what the hell they're talking about? Now, if you're maybe talking about a Muhammad Ali or a Rocky Marciano or a Lennox Lewis, people overall that really, really overall, defended their stance in the history of boxing, then okay, I could maybe understand that. But if you're talking about fighters like Evander Holyfield, who ended up losing to Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis overall, even though, of course, he was able to beat Mike Tyson. But what other great heavyweight was Evander Holyfield really able to beat during his time? Now, of course, he was able to beat the older George Foreman, but I'm not really sure if you would call him a great, at least at that time. Don't get me wrong, Evander was a great fighter, but is he as great as Tyson Fury? In my opinion, no, he isn't. Because Fury was the best of his time. All right, it just is what it is. He's undefeated. All right, it just is what it is. He found a way to win when Evander Holyfield always didn't find a way to win. And some people may say that's not fair because Evander Holyfield was a little bit more of a natural cruiserweight, but eventually he kind of built up the heavyweight. Tyson Fury is certainly better than overall, or at least greater than certain guys like Riddick Bowe or guys like Mike Tyson. He has to be ranked above those guys when it comes down to it. So who really is above Tyson Fury in the history of the weight division? Maybe overall, probably Muhammad Ali, probably Rocky Marciano and Lennox Lewis. Maybe some people would debate Larry Holmes or, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, that's up to you. I would say Tyson Fury, in my view, that he's probably around the top 5, the top 7 range in terms of the all-time great heavyweights, may even be a little bit higher. No, I wouldn't say that he's the greatest heavyweight ever in terms of accomplishments at the moment, but if Tyson Fury is able to beat Usyk and then possibly a couple of other contenders, he'll be right there.
Heavyweight win of all time. They did the same thing when Golovkin beat Danny Jacobs. I remember before that fight, before Golovkin fought Danny Jacobs, 70% of the comments when it comes to videos I was making leading up to this fight were fans saying that Danny Jacobs is garbage. He's already been knocked out before, he has no chin, etc., etc., etc. As soon as Gennady Golovkin gets to win, now they're talking about how good Danny Jacobs was.
Yes, and I bet that you were one of those guys because you didn't like Gennady Golovkin at that time. Shocker when it comes down to it. And you were probably one of the guys trying to say that Danny Jacobs has a real chance. And then all of a sudden, now that Gennady and Canelo Alvarez have beat Danny Jacobs, what does Dantes say? Oh, well, he was already knocked out before with that bullshit. So come on, stop being a hypocrite.
Just to make Golovkin's resume look better. So there's no doubt about it. We all know that when it comes to May, Devin Haney versus Lomachenko for undisputed 98% of the non-black Americans, they will be desperately rooting for Lomachenko to win this fight. Now, and I'll close out.
I would agree with that.
With this last point. Did you guys notice when Bob Arum said none of those fighters, Ali, Mayweather, Leonard, none of them compare to Lomachenko? And I think it was Dan Rafael that threw up the alley hoop and said, even Ali and Manny Pacquiao? Because media, they're loving this, and they're saying, hey man, if we're going to say he's greater than those guys, we might as well just say he's greater than all of them. So Bob Arum, he obliged the reporter by...
Well, I'm not really sure if they said that Lomachenko was really greater than any of those fighters, meaning greater in terms of accomplishments. But I think that what they all meant by it is that Lomachenko might be the most skilled fighter that they've personally ever seen. And to be fair to DontaesBoxingNation, there was a lot of people overall saying that at the time. And I get it, Lomachenko's an all-time great talent. But you can't necessarily say that about someone, at least in my view, all in all, especially with some of the things people are saying, until they've really proved it.
Taking that alley hoop and slam dunking the ball by saying even Ali. But notice, the reporter said even Manny Pacquiao and Ali, and you heard Bob Arum, he didn't even mention Manny Pacquiao's name. In fact, when he compared Lomachenko to all the fighters that he's seen in the past, he did not include Manny Pacquiao's name. So what that tells you is even Bob Arum acknowledges that Manny Pacquiao is not on Floyd Mayweather's level. And that's why he compared...
I would agree with that. I don't think that Manny Pacquiao is on Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s level, but what I will say is this. I say that he's about a level below him.
Lomachenko to Mayweather and Ali, and did not include Manny Pacquiao's name. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out, guys.
But anyways, I just thought that video would be very particularly interesting. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. It's going to be very interesting to see what ends up happening in this Lomachenko versus Devin Haney fight. I hope overall that it's a very entertaining fight. I hope overall that it's a competitive fight. Do I believe that more than likely it's going to be? I think there will be competitive spots, but I just don't see Lomachenko beating Devin Haney. I think that Devin Haney is the perfect type of style to beat that of a Lomachenko, someone that can clearly use his distance as well as mix it up with him whenever he wants. On top of that, he's probably about a natural 140-pounder, while Lomachenko's probably about a natural 130-pounder. And some people, of course, will see that as an excuse, but I don't think it's an excuse. I just think that it's reality. Lomachenko very clearly has pretty much been outsized in almost every single fight that he's been at 135. So it is what it is. So I don't see Lomachenko beating Devin Haney. I predict Devin Haney more than likely to win the fight about 8 rounds to 4. We'll see what happens. Hopefully the fight is a bit more competitive, and best of luck, of course, to both gentlemen, but we'll see what ends up happening here. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.